Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the McKinney. This is a part number RB-TA4714. This is a raised barrel, beveled edge preparation, 4.5 NRP, non-removable pin, 10B hinge. So there's a lot there. It's really not a lot. This is the only thing that separates this from every other hinge in the world is that it's a raised barrel hinge. And a raised barrel hinge is this hinge's defining characteristic. In fact, the part number literally means raised barrel. Why would you need a raised barrel hinge? There are instances when people have installed them and it's worked out splendidly because they had to, and there's instances when people have had an application that required a raised barrel hinge, but they didn't have raised barrel hinges, so they had to work it elsewhere otherwise. I'm going to draw just a quick sketch. A raised barrel hinge is really required when you have an application of the installation of a door in relationship to the frame forgive me. I promise this will be worth it. Okay. A standard application. That's a normal hinge, right? That's a normal hinge. You get into a situation where your door is all of a sudden set in. Now the barrel of the knuckle of the hinge, the barrel of the hinge is not in a position where they need where it will allow for proper operation. I've literally seen people chisel out the side of the jamb or otherwise accommodate that. Now if we took that barrel and made it askew and put the vertical axis over here, we would be in really good shape. We would have that drawing. And that's what a raised barrel hinge does. That's exactly what it's for. Okay? Raised barrel hinge application. The only thing you have to know with it is, do you have a square edge door or do you have a beveled edge door? Because the way that they will manufacture the door leaf is dependent on where it's going to sit on the door. Let's take a look at it. This is exactly the hinge that we're discussing. This is an oil rub bronze. This is literally covered in oil, which is what it should be. It's an oil rub bronze hinge. So as we study the hinge, really this sort of perspective allows you to see that barrel should be right over here, but when you skew it out here, you're lifting that barrel off of the frame so that the frame can run long and that the barrel of the hinge doesn't interfere or need to otherwise get buried into the jamb. You do see them. You'll see them in residential applications all the time. Like on patio doors. Patio doors, residential applications, doors go out to the job, to the house, it's built, and they realize, wait a minute, our walls are 6-inch thick. You've sent jambs that are 4.5. Okay, so what do? Order all new doors, all new frames at least? The door salesman who missed it, it's not going to want to do that. What can be done is that jamb extensions can be installed, applied right to the face of the frame. That's going to necessitate a problem. That's going to give you a problem with that hinge. So when that jamb sticks out further, I mean, this is literally if our frame came to here, and then that became the jamb extension. The piece with the X is the jamb extension. Okay? This raised barrel hinge solves that problem. Okay? From here to here. All right, we've illustrated the point. Let's move on. So RB, raised barrel. Holding it this way is going to give us another good look. You can also tell right in here, when I want to hold those tight to the margin that would normally be between a door and a frame, you'll notice that my door leaf seems to take a walk a little bit. If I'm holding that as vertical as I can, my door leaf seems to come out this way, and that's because these are for beveled edge doors. 3 degree is the typical bevel. It's the normal bevel. 3 degree, it happens to be the bevel. If it's less or more, it's wrong. Having bevels that are incorrect is bad for a number of reasons. We did a job one time where the machine, our CNC router, was producing like a 2 degree bevel. And luckily we spotted it right away, and luckily it wasn't a 4 degree bevel. The problem is the hardware that you apply to the edge of the door is not going to account, if it's a beveled faceplate on a door, it's not going to account for a 2 degree bevel because it's 3 degree. We were luckily able to recalibrate the machine and then get it to, the machine needed to be recalibrated, and we just reran the doors because we weren't reducing the width of the door, and that was the trick, to not reduce the width of the door. We may have skimmed, 30 thousandths off of it, but the doors were at 35 and 13/16. So they, 35 and 3/4, 35 and 13/16. You're going to be kind of okay, but it's a problem when your bevel is not accurate. It would also be a problem if you had a square edge door and tried to stuff this on here, because you're going to really draw, if I bring those leaves parallel, you're going to draw that margin between the leaves to 0, and that's not a healthy installation. Okay, so the bend of this needs to be compensated for what you're doing on the edge of the door. I know it's hard to tell because I'm just simply holding it in my hand, but you can see from afar that it's wider down here than it is up here, and that's the bottom line. So let's dissect the part number a little bit. RB. So just about the RB, let's dissect it. And I'm looking at the cut sheet that's linked to down below in this video. The RB. If the door is not flush with the frame, but rather is sitting back in a deep reveal, and that's what it's called, or an inset. I wouldn't call it a reveal. I would call it an inset. I think in the world of woodworking, it would be called a reveal, but in the world of doors and frames, we think of reveal as something a bit different, don't we? We think of a reveal as the dimension from the face of the header to the face of the door, that dimension. That's what we think of reveal. I would call this dimension out here the inset. So if you had an extraordinary inset, and reveal is not wrong to use, but if someone says, yeah, I've got a reveal of, I'm thinking push side of the door, header to the face of the door. That's a reveal. So if someone said, yeah, my door is inset 3/4 inch, I'm first going to say, wow, what are you doing for the hinges? Or what kind of, yeah, that's why I'm calling, I need raised barrel hinges. But rather, if the door is not flush with the frame, but rather is sitting back in a deep reveal from the face of the frame, a full mortise raised barrel may be used in hanging the door. The solution offered by this hinge is the offset of the hinge barrel away from the hinge jamb. Bevel of door should be specified. You can force these beveled, non-beveled things to work. It's just you'll have to compensate for it, and it's not a proper installation. Raised barrel hinges with an RB prefix are only available in 5 knuckle, 4.5, 4.5 standard, and heavyweight, and 5x4.5 heavyweight only. The hinges have NRP and are reversible for handing. They certainly do need to be reversible. The hinges have NRP. I read that as it's going to come with NRP. I specified NRP. I'm sure if I didn't specify NRP, they wouldn't have to put NRP on there. So making them reversible, the design of the McKinney hinge I like. There's not a hole in one of the caps. That's the set screw for the NRP, non-removable pin. What happens is when you have a set screw for NRP, there's a groove that's been cut in the pin. You tighten that down. Obviously, the placement of the NRP way over here tells me that that's the cap, that this is the pin and that's the cap. They're not going to NRP the tip of the, the very tip of the hinge pin down here. So I would loosen that. I would get a cloth and I would get a very fine, I would get a tool that had incredibly fine teeth on it, and I would cover that. And I would carefully try to move that sucker out a little bit. The fact of the matter is, why do you even want to do that? Do you care that on left-hand doors you're going to have your NRP at the bottom, or right-hand reverse, and left-hand reverse or right-hand doors, your NRP is going to be at the top? If you don't care, don't go playing with it. That's my opinion. When they say that they're reversible for handing, I think all they mean is, you don't like it this way? Put it this way. It's all good. What they could have done is simply put the NRP in the center of the hinge and been done with it. In the center of the barrel assembly. Might be a tooling requirement. Maybe their tools, come in at an angle that's such that it's nice to have it in one end. Don't really know. I may have done that to make it completely symmetrical from either end. What do I know? I don't manufacture hinges. So 4.5 standard and heavyweight, 5 by 4.5. A 5-inch tall hinge would make a lot of sense. It's a taller hinge, and my understanding is that it really carries the load of a heavier door more efficiently by being just that half-inch taller. So be mindful. If you've got a door that's wider than 3 foot or heavier than average, go with a 5-inch hinge. It's really smart, easy money in terms of the life expectancy of the unit. So as we leave the cut sheet and move on down further into the page where we see this, product, they show a TA4714, an RB TA4714, okay? A TA or a TA2714 is going to be a standard, the ubiquitous common 5-knuckle ball bearing full mortise standard weight hinge that is used in almost all instances. So, how did the factory know that I wanted beveled edge? They knew that because they want you to literally use a different part number. Specify RBTA 4714, which is our part number. So it's a TA2714. You're going to bump into that McKinney part number everywhere. But if we're dealing with raised barrel and we want it beveled edge, we're going to do a TA4714. That's going to tell the factory this is beveled. Versus the RBTA 2714, this is square. So the proper use of the part number is what told the factory. They have it technically listed on here twice, that 47 and then the BV. They didn't need to put BV on here. It's understood as a 4714 hinge. So the 2714 hinge, the hinge that we basically have, the hinge that we do have, standard weight raised barrel hinges are recommended for use on average frequency and or medium weight wood and metal doors where the door is set in a deep revealed frame. Standard weight raised barrel hinges are supplied with no hole bottom plug, and the pin is held in place by an NRP set screw, which allows the hinge to be reversible. Yeah, I don't, okay. Flip the hinge over, I understand. Specify RBTA 4714 when you have a beveled edge door. Heavyweight raised barrel hinges are recommended for use on high frequency or heavy doors and frame, heavier wood or steel doors where the door is set in a deep reveal. Heavyweight raised barrel hinges are supplied with a no hole bottom plug and the pin is held in place by the NRP, etc., etc., etc. No hole. Now, if they had a hole in one of those caps, you're for sure going to be flipping them over. This really renders it unnecessary to flip it over. That covers the cut sheet of the raised barrel hinge. They've got a template down below that shows us 4.5, 4.5, standard weight 134 thousandths, heavy weight 180 thousandths, 5 by 4.5, heavy weight 190 thousandths. 5-inch heavyweights are 190. What's the important dimension on this hinge? The first dimension, the height. Okay, the height is the first dimension. That's the most important dimension to know. If we laid that hinge out flat in front of us, that's where the second dimension comes in, 4.5. Why is the first dimension on a door the width, and why is the first dimension on a hinge the height? I don't know. I feel that it's important to... It might be because the order in which you list the dimensions, you think to yourself, what's the most important dimension on a hinge? What's the most important dimension on a door? Well, they're all important. But what would be, if I was going to say, tell me this first about the door? I wouldn't say, tell me the height. Okay, it's a 7-foot door. Great. I'm going to first ask, what's the width of the door? On the hinge, I don't really care as much about the width because the application is going to dictate the width. Wide throw, or a hinge that is narrower than it is tall, aluminum storefront. I'm going to say, what's the height of the hinge? Because that's going to really tell me what type of door, what size of door are we dealing with. Is it 1 3/4? Is it going to be 1 3/8? Is it going to be 2 1/4 or greater? So I think the first dimension comes in because that's just the dimension that's considered more important, maybe subconsciously. Okay, so that's why I think that's the case. Now this is a steel-based hinge. That is standard weight. It is a full mortise hinge. It's difficult to see on this hinge how it's considered full mortise, but the bottom line is the way that the hinge is bent, or the swag on the hinge leaf, I guess it's illustrated better here. The way that the hinge is bent tells us that it is a full mortise hinge, so if you were to lay the hinge open flat, or lay the hinge open and then lay it flat, you know, a full mortise hinge is going to rock back and forth, whereas with a full surface hinge there is no swag, so the bottom of the leaf doesn't have this bend in it. It literally goes straight across, and then your barrel sits on top of that plane. Okay. The full mortise hinge is most commonly used in flush door frame, wall conditions, hollow metal frames, wood frames, etc. Those are used with a standard hollow metal frame or wood door which is flush or inset 1/16 of an inch. Now they're using the proper term, inset, from the face of the frame. So the door is moved in a little bit. If you ran your hand down the face of the door and the frame, a typical hollow metal frame with a steel or wood door is going to be scooched in a little bit. It's a 1/16 of an inch, 3/32, whatever it is. That's the inset. Well, if you make that 3/4 inch or 15 inch, whatever, you're going to need hardware to compensate. That's the general application. Wood frames, steel frames, aluminum frames, fiberglass frames. These hinges, they have listed available in sizes from 3.5, 3.5, all the way to 6 by 6. I bet they can do bigger. I don't see why. I would think they could do 8 by 8, but they might only do that in a heavyweight or variations of that. The standard weight, 3.5, 3.5, 4 by 4, 4.5 by 4, or 4.5, 4.5. The 4.5 by 4 is a very common hinge in the aluminum storefront industry. They really, and actually, when you have an application where the frame wraps the wall, don't use a 4.5, 4.5. The better hinge to use is 4.5 by 4. Why? It draws that hinge barrel back towards the face of the frame an additional 1/4 inch. Less projecting hardware is always better. I had a client who was doing 2 1/4 doors. What were they? they were 1.75" thick doors, and he had 5x5 hinges installed on them. And he had a really odd back set as a result. And the doors were machined, the jambs were machined. We were replacing the hinges, however. So he had basically zero back set on the hinge, but the hinge barrel really hung off the face of everything huge because it's too big of a hinge for an 1.75" thick door. I said to the client, you know, you'd really be better served. We got to stick with a 5-inch tall hinge, but you'd be better served with a 4.5, even though you're not going to change your back set. But the jamb was flush to the wall, and that barrel was really hanging off. Bringing it back in a 1/4 inch would have affected nothing because there was only about a 100-degree opening templated on the closers anyway. Client didn't opt for that, which was odd to me. He said, I just don't want to change anything. And I'm thinking, no, there's no change. It's going to just look better. And it will manage the load of the door better because you're bringing that vertical axis of pivoting back in closer to the center of the thickness of the door. Anyway, that would have been an example appropriate for a hinge that's not as wide as it is tall. They can do 5x4.5. That's going to be a common hinge in hollow metal work when you're bigger than 3 foot. 3.6, 3.8, 4.0. 5x5s when you get into thicker doors. 6x6 when you get into thicker doors. 2 3/4 thick doors, things of that nature. Thicker, whatever the case is. Lots of options on the TA4714, and I imagine they can give you some of these options on these as well. Meaning, some of those I expect you can do, radiused corners. If this was residential construction, this isn't. This is going to a project, a high-end woodworking company that we deal with in the Chicago area. Wood doors, wood frames. They could have easily have taken these 1/4 inch radius, or even 5/8 radius. They didn't though. Hospital tip. I don't know if you can do a hospital tip on a raised barrel. I don't see why you couldn't, but I don't make a living manufacturing hinges, so I'm going to say that no. Ball tip or steeple tip, I would say that would be easily available on these hinges. Safety stud feature, I would think you could do, maybe not. A safety stud is where there's a piece of metal that's been applied to the leaf itself, maybe about the diameter of a dime, or maybe a nickel, maybe 5/16 thick, and then there's a hole prepped in the other side of the leaf. Well, it won't be quite 5/16 thick. It's probably a 1/4 at the most. So that and this leaf has a hole, when the leaves close, that stud sits into the hole of the opposite leaf, meaning you can't take, if you were to drive that pin out, you still can't separate the leaves from each other. Doing wire transfer preparations, I'm gonna say absolutely not available on a raised barrel hinge. You've got some really funny angles there. I don't think their drill bits are going to drill like that. And I would say that those would be your options. Radiused corner, maybe a safety security stud, decorative tips, ball tip or steeple tip would be about it on that. It's made of steel, so they can do any finish on steel in the world with limitations. Can you do this finish? It depends. So it's McKinney, which means it's ASSA ABLOY. ASSA ABLOY is the mothership. McKinney is a company owned by ASSA. Many other companies are, namely Sargent and Rockwood. I have seen marketing materials from these companies that have said, listen, we're really getting into the custom business. If you've got a blank piece of paper, sketch out what you want, and we'll see if we can manufacture it for you. Rockwood is a company that is superb when it comes to accommodating, a sister company of McKinney's, when it comes to accommodating requests for special orders. Don't hesitate to ask for variations of this McKinney hinge that will better suit your installation. And probably in this case it might be a finish, maybe powder coated black or maybe powder coated red. Whatever the case might be, run it by McKinney, run it by us, we'll run it by McKinney and see if they can accommodate. There is a link below this video as well to the document called template. Let's pull that up. As I'm pulling up the library of hinges, they do have templates for 8x8 hinges. So that link to the template is going to show you the location of the screw holes. If you're not sure if this is going to match what you have, and it's likely that it won't, double check all that material first, the locations. This will obviously include screws for your application. This appears to be all machine and all wood screws, 8 of each. That's fine and dandy. You're not going to get in trouble by not having enough screws. I don't believe that it's standard practice to send 8 of everything. You can't possibly need 8 of each. It would be, in my experience, a bit more industry standard to send all machine and half wood. No, regardless, it is standard practice to specify the fastener that you need. So indicate that in the comment field when you're ordering. All AWS, all wood screws, or steel frame by wood door, metal frame. Indicate that so that you don't get to the job and now you're putting in 2 hinge screws per leaf because you have half of the quantity that you need to do the job. That template will also serve as a template for many other heights of, widths of hinges. This is for just 4.5 inch tall, but they can incorporate their wide throw series. A wide throw hinge is when you, again, have a very deep inset and you need it, you need a wide throw hinge, in this case, to bring that axis of pivoting out here, so you can take that door and flip it 180 degrees or well out and around, is where a wide throw hinge is going to be used. They can do up to 8 inch wide on a 4.5. Anyone wider than 8 inch, I'm unaware of, short of it being utterly custom and manufactured items. So that template is there. Will show different part numbers for steel or non-ferrous based material, different knuckle configurations. They also show you standard and heavyweight as well on there, so be mindful to stay in the row that you need. TA or TB4714. Okay. Not much else to say about this. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the McKinney products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. McKinney's a good company. They've been around for decades, many decades, maybe 1930s. There is, on that link below this video to the manufacturer's page, you will be able to pull up old catalogs. That McKinney used to be known as iron forged hardware. If you've got, think Gothic, black wrought iron. That's what McKinney was all about, certainly once upon a time. And we've got those catalogs. They may or may not be uploaded by the time you're looking for them because we have a huge backlog of catalogs to scan, archival vintage catalogs. But that's what McKinney was known for. They were also known 30 plus years ago for Division 10 equipment, commercial restroom equipment. Back in the 90s, we would get a call all the time for spindles or whatnot for McKinney commercial restroom equipment. And even just in 2019, I got a call for a piece of their equipment. That was many years ago. Any questions on the RB TA4714 raised barrel hinge, beveled edge, NRP, oil rub bronze, 4.5, or any other McKinney product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.